She didn't even ask me. I came home from the clinic still dizzy from the meds, still sore from what I went through, and my room smelled like lavender. But not mine. It was her lavender. That soft, soapy old lady scent that clings to everything it touches. I stood at the door blinking like I'd walked into the wrong house. The quilt on the bed wasn't mine. The photo frames had been changed. My slippers, my favorite worn pair, were gone. And then I heard her voice. Mildred. Laughing in the kitchen like this had always been her home. She said you'd be gone a while, she chuckled. So I thought, why let this room go to waste? I didn't respond. My fingers curled against the doorframe. I should have said something. I should have screamed. But instead, I stood there in silence like a guest in my own house. My sister-in-law, Amy, looked up from the sink and smiled like nothing had happened. You weren't using it, she said. Just like that. Like that room, like my life was some piece of extra furniture in a garage sale. But I had been using it. That room was all I had left after the last year, the divorce, the surgery, the whispered diagnoses. It was the only place I felt like I could cry without someone telling me I was being too dramatic. Amy was supposed to be helping me heal, not handing over my space to her mother-in-law like I was some tenant on borrowed time. And yet there she was. Her long blonde hair in a low bun sleeves rolled to her elbows, humming like a Disney wife. And there Mildred sat in my chair in my robe, watching her son Amy's husband flip pancakes like this was all some Saturday sitcom. Except it wasn't, not for me. The clinic stay was supposed to be temporary, a checkup after the hysterectomy. But my body had taken longer to bounce back than expected. 2 weeks turned into 5. And when I finally came home, I expected warmth, maybe flowers, maybe my own damn bed. What I got was this, a house that no longer smelled like me. A family pretending they didn't notice I'd vanished. I just thought she needed the space more. Amy said later, handing me a mug of chamomile like that would fix anything. She's been going through a lot too, you know. With the chemo, and well, she's practically family. I almost laughed. Practically Mildred wasn't even blood. She was her husband's mother, not mine. We weren't related by blood or by law. But apparently, that counted for more than the fact that I'd grown up in this house, slept in that room since I was 15, helped Amy pay the mortgage after Todd walked out. No one asked me, not once. Not when they moved my books into the garage. Not when they took down the picture of me and Mom. Not when they replaced my scent with hers. She gave my room away like it was nothing, and in doing so she gave away more than that. She gave away the last shred of control I had left. But I wasn't going to leave quietly. Not this time. Not after everything I knew. Because the thing about Amy is she looks innocent, but I know better. I know what she hides when the lights go off, what kind of whispers she trades with the neighbor behind the fence, what sort of photos she deletes from her phone when her husband walks in. And what she did with my room? That was just the beginning. Before she was the lady who gave my room to her husband's mother, Amy was my closest friend. I don't say that lightly, not after what she did. But I think you need to understand she wasn't always this person. Or maybe she was, and I just didn't want to see it. We met when I was 22, and she was dating my brother Todd. She had this hopeful sparkle in her voice, like someone who still thought marriage fixed things. I'd just come home after dropping out of college to take care of Mom, and Amy was the only one who ever asked how I was doing, without making it sound like small talk. I know what it's like, she whispered once, helping me clean up after one of Mom's falls. To always be the one cleaning up the mess. I thought we were the same. When Todd left, ran off with someone from his office classic midlife crisis move, Amy stayed in the house. With me. And I didn't even ask her to pay rent at first. I told her we're family, because back then I thought love was loyalty and sacrifice. She was the one who convinced me to get the surgery. Your health comes first now, she said. You've spent too much time putting others ahead of yourself. So I listened. I finally did the thing I'd been too scared to do, booked the consult, scheduled the hysterectomy, and arranged a short stay at a post-op recovery clinic. I cried on the phone with Amy the night before. I don't know what I'd do without you here, I said, my voice cracking. And she said, don't worry, I've got the house, just focus on getting better. I believed her. But now, standing in the hallway, my suitcase still at my feet, my room hijacked, my belongings shuffled off like clutter. Something about it all made me realize I hadn't been needed anymore. I'd been convenient, until I wasn't. That first night back, I slept on the couch. Amy offered to set up an air mattress in the den, but that was where we used to keep the litter boxes when Mom was still alive. I refused. You could have told me, I said quietly, sipping the tea she'd made. She shrugged. You were in recovery. I didn't want to stress you out. But it wasn't about stress. It was about control. About the way she looked at me like I was the intruder. Like I had returned to a home that had already decided it didn't need me. Mildred barely acknowledged me. She acted like she'd always lived here like I was the guest. She wore my robe around the house, rearranged my spice rack, left the front door unlocked. She even asked if I could take my snacks off the pantry shelf so she could make room for her barley and prune juice. I felt erased. But I still smiled. I smiled through it like a woman too afraid to face the truth that this wasn't an accident. It was a replacement. And it didn't help that Amy had changed too. She dressed differently now, softer, flirtier. She'd started wearing lipstick again, and not just any color my lipstick. The same shade I used to wear before the surgery made me feel invisible. A deep plum color I'd left in the bathroom cabinet. Now it was hers, just like my room. I should have spoken up, but I didn't. Not even when she started calling Mildred Mom. I'm not proud of how long I stayed silent. How long I slept on that couch waiting for someone to realize I didn't belong there anymore. But one night, I heard something. It was just past midnight. I'd gotten up to use the bathroom, but the hallway light was off, and I heard whispers. The kind you're not supposed to hear. At first I thought it was the TV, but no, this was softer, closer. Amy's voice. And a man's laugh. But it wasn't Todd. I froze behind the kitchen wall and peeked around the corner. They were sitting on the back porch, Amy and our neighbor, Jeremy. Her hand was on his knee. He was leaning in close. And when she laughed, it wasn't her usual laugh. It was the kind of laugh you give to someone who knows your body like a secret. I stepped back quietly, heart pounding. It hit me then. This wasn't just about Mildred, or my room, or the air mattress in the den. This was about Amy rewriting the whole story. A new mother-in-law, a new man, a new house dynamic. One where I no longer existed in the narrative. But what she didn't know was that I still had the journal. The one she'd kept during her last year with Todd. And in it were things I was never meant to read. Things that would make her lavender-scented little kingdom come crashing down. The journal was tucked away in the back of the linen closet, beneath a stack of old towels that still smelled faintly of bleach and mothballs. She must have forgotten about it, or maybe she thought I wouldn't dare go through her things. But that night after I saw her with Jeremy on the porch, something inside me snapped loose. I wasn't the fragile post-op patient anymore. I was someone who had been used, replaced, and erased, and I was done being quiet about it. I pulled out the worn, floral-bound book, blue with tiny pressed flowers on the front, the kind she used to write grocery lists in before Todd left. I knew what it was the moment I saw the curled edges of the pages, the broken spine. Amy only ever kept two kinds of journals, the ones she showed the world, and the one that lived hidden under those towels. I opened it to a random page. June 4th. I can't even look Todd in the eyes anymore. Every time I hear his car pull in the driveway, I feel like I'm lying to someone I once loved. June 15th. Jeremy says it's not wrong if you're unhappy. But is that enough? I told him I couldn't do this forever. I said, she lives with us. My sister-in-law is in the next room. And he just kissed me like that made it more exciting. The words blurred as I read them. It was all there. Her affair with Jeremy hadn't started recently. It had started while I still lived here. While she sat across from me at dinner telling me I should fight for my health. While I cried about losing my uterus and she told me, you still have a future. She'd been sneaking around for months. Todd had no idea. And now she had the house, the freedom, the man next door, and even my room. It started to rain outside, one of those soft, insistent summer rains that makes the air heavy and charged. The kind of rain that always made Mom cry. I thought of her then. What she'd say if she saw what had become of the home she left behind. The women she thought would take care of each other. I took the journal and curled up on the couch, listening to the storm beat softly against the windows. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I read every ugly confession Amy had scribbled in that book. I kissed Jeremy in the garage while Todd was upstairs on the phone with his sister. She was talking about her biopsy results. I could hear her crying, and I still didn't stop. I thought about what would happen if she didn't make it. I thought about the room, the space, and I hated myself for it. But also I didn't. That last one, that page was dated 2 days before I was admitted to the clinic. She'd already made up her mind, before I even left. I stared at the ceiling and tried to breathe, tried to make sense of how I had ended up here couch-bound, displaced, betrayed, and by the one person I thought would hold my hand through the darkest chapter of my life. That's when I heard the door creak. Barefoot footsteps on the hardwood floor, and then her voice soft, casual. "You're up late." I turned the journal over, hiding it beneath a pillow. Couldn't sleep. She walked over with a glass of water, her robe tied loose around her waist hair, damp from the rain. "Storm woke me too," she said, sitting on the armrest beside me. I looked up at her, studied the soft smile she always wore like armor. "You've changed," I said. Her smile didn't falter. "We all do, that's life." I leaned forward just a little, just enough for her to see the edge of the journal peeking out from under the pillow. Her breath caught, just for a second. "That's mine," she said. "No," I said quietly. "It was in my house, in my closet, in my room." We stared at each other, the silence between us thick with thunder and regret. "I didn't want you to find out this way," she whispered. "But maybe it's better that you know." I waited for her to say sorry, to take something back, to offer even a sliver of remorse. Instead, she said something I'll never forget. "She makes fewer demands than you ever did. Mildred, I mean. She's quiet. She's grateful. And she doesn't make me feel like a bad person for wanting something more than survival." I blinked. "I was recovering from surgery," I said, voice trembling. "Not asking you to save me, I just needed my room." Amy stood up, slowly brushing her robe down, as if this were just another night. As if we hadn't crossed into new forbidden territory. "You've always made things harder than they needed to be." And just like that, she walked away. Back to the bedroom that used to be mine. Back to her lavender and soft lies. But she didn't know one thing. She might have taken my room, but I had taken her words. And I wasn't done yet. The next morning I made coffee like I used to, 4 scoops of dark roast, a splash of oat milk, and a pinch of cinnamon. The smell drifted through the house like a ghost of who I used to be. I didn't do it for Amy, or for Mildred, who had already started leaving her dentures in my teacup like this was her permanent retirement home. No, I made that coffee for myself. Because the woman who had stood silent on the couch for weeks, she was gone. And in her place was someone holding evidence, a journal laced with emotional arsenic. I sat at the kitchen table, flipped to one of the last entries. Amy's handwriting was starting to slope more wildly, like her conscience was unraveling, even if her lips had stayed tight. Sometimes I look at her and think, what if she never came back? What if she just didn't make it? And then I feel free. Isn't that awful? I feel free. Those words echoed louder than the storm had, louder than her soft footsteps retreating down the hall last night. And I knew what I had to do. I made copies. Old-school ink-smudged printer coughing through paper copies. I printed out every entry that mentioned me, Todd Jeremy, and her cold thoughts about my recovery. I made a digital scan too, just in case she tried to play dumb. Then I slid the originals back under the towels exactly as I'd found them. Let her wonder. At lunch, she didn't even look at me. Mildred commented on my pale complexion, and Amy mumbled something about needing to run errands. She left her tea untouched. I watched her glance at the linen closet before she grabbed her keys. Good, let her stew. But I wasn't finished yet. That evening, I walked over to Jeremy's place. I hadn't done that in years, not since we were kids, and he'd helped me fix a flat tire on my bike. His porch light flickered like a cheap motel sign. He opened the door barefoot, wearing a baseball cap and a half-ironed shirt like he wasn't sure if he was lounging or hiding. "Hey," he said, surprised. "Got a minute?" I asked, holding a manila envelope tight against my chest. He stepped aside. His place smelled like cheap pizza and dog shampoo. "You okay?" he asked. "Do you love her?" I asked back. He blinked. "Amy..." I didn't respond, just handed him the envelope. Inside 10 scanned pages from the journal. I hadn't highlighted anything, didn't need to. The truth was loud enough. He flipped through the first few pages, his expression changing from confused to ashen. His mouth opened slightly when he hit the line about kissing in the garage while Todd was on the phone with me. He lingered on the part where she imagined me dying and called it freeing. "I didn't know she wrote this," he said hoarsely. "But you knew about everything else," I replied. He rubbed the back of his neck. "It was supposed to be temporary. She said she was lonely." "She is lonely," I said, "but that doesn't excuse what she did to me, or to Todd." Jeremy sat down on his sagging couch and dropped the pages on the table. "I didn't want to hurt anyone." "But you did," I said, "and now you'll have to decide what kind of man you are." I turned to leave, then paused. "She gave my room to Mildred," I said without turning around, "while I was at the clinic. Just thought you should know how far she'll go when she thinks someone's no longer useful." I walked out into the night, the wind cold but clean. Back home, Amy was already in the kitchen, waiting. "You went to Jeremy's?" she asked. Her tone was calm, like a teacher scolding a student for passing notes. I said nothing. I saw the journal, she said, voice tighter now. You folded the corner of page 73. That's the one I didn't want anyone to read. Then why write it down, I asked. Her eyes burned into mine, because I thought I could trust myself to never become the kind of woman who would mean it. She stepped closer, and for a moment I saw the old Amy. The girl who cried with me when Mom died. The one who brought me soup after chemo. The one who braided my hair while I read her terrible poetry in the dark. But she wasn't that girl anymore, and I wasn't the doormat who'd stay quiet while being erased. I don't want a war, she whispered. I smiled. Then maybe you shouldn't have started one. She didn't respond. Just turned, walked down the hall, and slammed the door to my room. Let her sleep with her guilt. I had just started to wake up. Mildred started calling me the girl on the couch. She'd say it loudly, as if I weren't sitting right there, as if I didn't hear her asking Amy. How long is the girl on the couch staying like I was some distant cousin overstaying her welcome after a funeral? It wasn't just the room anymore. It was how they moved around me, how the house began to bend to their rhythm instead of mine. My photos stayed boxed in the garage. My mugs were pushed to the back of the cabinet. The password to the Wi-Fi mysteriously changed one day, and no one offered it again. So I did what I had to. I watched, I listened, I waited. One evening, Mildred knocked on the bathroom door while I was inside. I didn't answer just to see what she'd do. She opened the door anyway. Oh, she said, fake surprise all over her powdered face. I thought you were out again. I live here, I snapped, pulling my robe tighter. Or did you forget? She didn't apologize, just wrinkled her nose like I'd tracked in something unpleasant. You used to be such a sweet girl, quiet, helpful. Now it's always an edge with you. I stepped forward. I had surgery. I lost everything. And I came home to find my room, my life handed to a woman who isn't even family. Her eyes sharpened. Amy is family. No, I said, lowering my voice. She's just someone who plays house with whatever man is nearby. Her mouth twitched, but she didn't argue. That night she sat longer at the dinner table. Didn't say much. Just watched me with those careful eyes like she knew I was building something. Like she'd seen this kind of fury before and recognized the signs. And then she said something that made the air go still. You think Amy's the only one with secrets? I stopped chewing. What's that supposed to mean? She smiled softly, as if she were tucking something sharp into a velvet glove. I've been around long enough to know when a woman's lying. And Amy. She tilted her head. She lies with her whole body. Especially when she thinks no one's watching. I blinked. Why are you telling me this now? She shrugged. Because I've worn that same smile she wears. The one that looks like survival but feels like poison. I stared at her. For the first time, I wondered what Mildred had seen or ignored. Who she used to be before she became this, the woman in my robe sleeping in my bed. She got up slowly, gripping the table edge. She's not as clever as she thinks, she said. You should check the attic. The attic? She didn't answer, just patted my hand like I was some poor soul too slow to catch on. That night, while the house slept, I climbed the narrow staircase to the attic. It smelled like dust and insulation and forgotten history. I flicked the light on and froze. There were boxes, dozens of them, labeled in Amy's handwriting. T-tax docs, K-keepsakes, J-cards, and one, Do Not Open 2018. I opened it. Inside Polaroids. Dozens of them. Amy and Jeremy. Some grainy and innocent, laughing in the backyard. Others not so innocent, his hand grazing her lower back. Her leaning into him at the lake. One with her sitting in his lap. Dated months before Todd ever left. At the bottom of the box was a manila folder. Inside, a torn letter, half burned. Only a few words were visible. Don't understand why she still lives there. She was supposed to move out. I want this life with you, without her in it. No signature, but I recognized the handwriting. Jeremy's. I felt my heart pound so loudly I was afraid I'd wake the house. This wasn't just an affair. It was a plan. They wanted me gone. Not just Todd, me. This wasn't survival. This was calculation. A long, slow erasure masked in lavender and tea. I clutched the photos to my chest, walked slowly down the stairs, and sat on the couch like I used to. Only this time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't quiet. And I wasn't done. Because now I had proof. And soon Amy would know what it feels like to lose a home. I waited until the next morning to make my move. Amy was humming in the kitchen, brewing coffee like she hadn't staged a slow, silent coup of everything I held dear. Mildred was in my room doing her usual crossword muttering clues to herself and snacking on something from my pantry. They thought I'd settled, that I'd accepted my role as the fragile sister-in-law on the couch. But I was never fragile. I was just watching. I dropped the envelope on the kitchen table between Amy and her half-sliced banana. She looked up, startled. What's this? Open it. She peeled it open with her freshly manicured nails. The smile faded before she hit the second photo. The one where Jeremy was nuzzling her neck on a picnic blanket. The one dated 4 months before Todd moved out. The color drained from her face. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. I found the box in the attic, I said softly. And the letter. You didn't even bother to burn all of it. Amy pushed the envelope away like it might bite her. You went through my private things. You went through my life, I shot back. You gave my room to a woman who didn't belong here. You deleted me. She tried to gather herself, folded her hands like she was about to host a PTA meeting. I know how it looks. No, don't. Don't try to fix this with that soft voice and those fake wide eyes. You used me. You were waiting for me to leave. You thought I wouldn't come back. Her voice cracked. I never wanted to hurt you. You didn't care if you did, I snapped. You just wanted me gone. You wanted the house, the control, the quiet, guilt-free nights with the man next door. She stood up abruptly. Fine, she hissed. Yes, I made mistakes. But you played victim so long you forgot how to live. You let your pain become your personality. I took a deep breath, willing myself not to shake. And yet I said coldly, you still needed me to vanish for your fantasy to work. She said nothing. Mildred shuffled into the kitchen at that moment, holding a teacup with my lipstick stain on it, plum-colored smudged. What's all the noise? Amy spun toward her, still flustered. Nothing. It's fine. Mildred looked at the envelope, then at Amy, then at me. Her voice was dry. She found them, didn't she? Amy froze, and that was the final piece. Mildred knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to go along with the charade. Enough to know the silence was part of the strategy. I stared at both of them, heart pounding. I'm not leaving, I said. Not now, not until you do. Amy scoffed. You can't kick me out. This house is in both our names after Todd left. I pulled out the second folder. The updated property paperwork. Todd had quietly transferred his share of the house to me just before he disappeared into his new life in Oregon. A final, guilt-ridden gesture. I hadn't told anyone. Amy's mouth fell open. You're lying. No, I said. I've just been waiting for the right time. She snatched the papers from my hand and scanned them. I knew you were waiting for me to fall apart, I said. But I didn't. I'm still here. Mildred sat down slowly, eyes wide. Amy looked like a trapped animal. You can't just throw us both out. I don't have to throw anyone out, I said calmly. But the locks are getting changed next week. You can stay. If you can look me in the eye every morning and tell me you still belong here. She didn't say a word. I walked back to the living room, folded my blanket neatly, and set it back on the couch. Then I picked up my suitcase, still half full from the clinic, and carried it down the hall. To my room. I opened the door without knocking. Mildred's scent slapped me in the face. I grabbed her robe from the hook, her pills from the nightstand, and her crossword from the bed. I opened the window and let the lavender out. Then I lay down in my own bed for the first time in weeks and closed my eyes. Down the hall I heard Amy cry. I didn't smile, but I didn't stop it either. The locksmith arrived on a Wednesday. A man in a faded green uniform, polite but brisk, whistling some tune I couldn't name. I didn't tell him the full story, just handed him the old brass keys and pointed toward the front and back doors. Amy wasn't home. She'd left that morning without saying where she was going, but her overnight bag was gone. I didn't ask. Mildred sat stiffly on the sofa, arms crossed, watching the locksmith like he was a threat to national security. You know, she said, finally, this is still her home. I didn't look up from my tea. She can stay, I said quietly. She just can't run it anymore. Mildred scoffed. You've always needed to control things. I smiled, not kindly. And you've always needed someone else's house to do it in. We didn't speak after that. The new locks clicked into place by noon. I thanked the man, paid in cash, and tucked the new keys into my pocket with a finality that made my chest tight. When Amy returned later that evening, she found the front door locked. She rang the bell twice, then knocked. She had to knock. That alone must have tasted bitter. I opened the door halfway, stared at her. She was wearing lipstick. Not my shade this time, but something red and defiant. You changed the locks. You don't live here anymore, I said. Her eyes widened. I thought we agreed. No, I cut her off. You made decisions when I was too broken to speak. Now I'm whole again, and this house remembers who it belongs to. She looked past me like she might see some shred of the life she built here still waiting inside. Where's Mildred? In the guest room. You know, the one you said wasn't big enough for her before you took mine. Silence. I just came for a few things, she muttered. I stepped aside. 15 minutes, I'll be timing. She walked in slower now, like the house had aged around her. She avoided my eyes as she moved room to room. I heard drawers open, the soft clink of jewelry, the rustle of sweaters stuffed into a bag. But what I noticed most was that she never once went near the attic. She knew what I'd seen, and she knew I still had it. Before she left, she turned to me. Her voice wasn't angry, it was something worse. Regretful. "You're not innocent either," she said. I raised a brow. "No, I'm just not a liar." She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in weeks, she looked like someone I didn't recognize. Not my sister-in-law, not my old friend. Just a woman who built her comfort on borrowed walls. She left without another word. The door shut with a final satisfying click. I leaned against it, the silence pressing around me like a weighted blanket. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Instead, I felt like I'd buried something. That night, I walked down the hallway toward my room. The air smelled cleaner now, no lavender, no guilt, no lies. I crawled into bed and stared at the ceiling. I was finally alone, but I couldn't sleep. Because when you burn something to the ground, you still have to live in the ashes. It was quiet for 3 days. Too quiet. Amy hadn't called. Mildred was still in the guest room, though she barely left it except to make toast and clatter dishes passive-aggressively. I let her stay for now. Evicting her would have made me feel too much like Amy. I needed to do this differently, with control, with time. But silence has a sound when it drags long enough, and on the 4th day I heard it crack. Jeremy. He was outside fixing a loose plank on the fence that divided our yard from his. I hadn't spoken to him since the day I gave him the envelope, the one with Amy's journal entries, and the truth she never expected anyone to read. He looked up and caught my eye. I should have walked away. Instead, I opened the screen door and stepped out onto the porch. We stood like that for a moment, neighbors, ex-co-conspirators, whatever we were now. "You planning to fix the whole fence?" I asked. He shrugged, tapping a hammer against his thigh. "Just the part she always used to climb through." I raised an eyebrow. "She used to sneak in," I asked, even though I already knew. He nodded. "At night, sometimes in the mornings. Said it was easier than going through the front door." "Of course she did." "She's not coming back," I said. Jeremy stared at the wood. "I know." A long silence passed. Then he looked up. "I didn't know she was writing it all down," he said. "The things in the journal." "She wrote more than that," I said. "She planned." He swallowed hard. "You think she ever really loved him?" "Todd," I asked. He nodded. I didn't answer right away. I think she loved the idea of being someone different. Safer, quieter, more contained. Todd made her feel steady. You made her feel dangerous. She chose both. Until she couldn't. Jeremy leaned on the fence post. "She told me you hated her." "I didn't," I said. "I do now." He didn't argue. "I ended it," he said softly. "The night you gave me those pages." "Good," I said. "She doesn't get to have you both." He chuckled dryly. "I don't think she has anyone now." I met his eyes. "That's her consequence, not mine." Jeremy looked older somehow. Or maybe I just finally saw him for who he was, a man who made cowardly choices under the illusion of chemistry. "I'm sorry," he said. I didn't say I forgave him, but I didn't slam the door either. Instead, I turned and went back inside. Mildred was in the hallway holding her cup of chamomile tea like a prop. "You're not going to tell Todd?" she asked. I paused. "Why? So he can send a check and disappear again." She stepped closer. "He deserves to know. He deserved a wife who didn't cheat with the man next door. And I deserved a home that didn't evict me while I was in a hospital gown." Mildred opened her mouth, then closed it. "You stayed quiet," I said. "You watched her give away my life and said nothing." "She took care of me," Mildred whispered. I stared at her. "So did I. Before you ever moved in. Before you were useful to her." She looked down at her cup. "I won't put you out," I said. "But I won't protect her legacy either." That night, I lit a candle in the living room. Not to mourn, not to soothe, but to reclaim. The house was quieter now. It echoed again, and this time it echoed me. In the silence, I heard something I hadn't heard in months. Myself. A week later, I got a phone call I didn't expect. Todd. I stared at the screen as it rang, that familiar name still saved in my phone under Todd Don't Answer, a relic, from a time when he'd vanish for months and reappear with apologies I didn't believe anymore. But this time I answered. "Hello?" "Hey," he said, voice cautious. "Amy called me." My heart sank. "She said you kicked her out," he added. I paused. "Did she tell you why?" "She said you were unstable, that the recovery didn't go well, that you'd been acting different." I nearly laughed. Of course she did. "Let me guess," I said. "She forgot to mention the affair with Jeremy, the photos, the journal." Todd went silent. She didn't mention that, no. I have proof, I said calmly. I'm not guessing, I'm not unraveling, I'm surviving. More silence. Then in a voice lower than I expected, he said, I'm sorry. I sat down. Not just for Amy, he continued. For all of it. For leaving you here with her. For not seeing it sooner. I swallowed hard. You signed over the house. Because I knew I owed you more than I could ever repay. He paused, then asked, can I take you to dinner? Why, to say it to your face. To ask you something I should have asked before I left. That night, I stood in front of my closet, the one Amy hadn't touched, and pulled out the dress I'd hidden behind my winter coats. Simple, black, soft, a dress I hadn't worn since the day of Mom's memorial. I almost didn't recognize myself in the mirror. I met Todd at a small restaurant downtown. Candlelight, soft music, the kind of place we used to joke about being too stuffy. He looked thinner, older, like guilt had worn him down. You look strong, he said. I had to be. He ordered tea for both of us, something I'd told him years ago I preferred to wine. I was surprised he remembered. I read the journal he said after the waiter left. I blinked. How? She emailed it to me, after you kicked her out. Said if she couldn't control the story, she'd at least make me pity her. And did you... He looked me straight in the eye. No, I didn't expect the next words. I want to give you the full deed. No more shared names. No more technical ownership. The house is yours legally and completely. I said nothing. And he added, I want to apologize for how I always made you the backup plan. You deserved better. You still do. I stirred my tea slowly. And what about Amy, I asked. She's staying with her cousin, he said. Jeremy's not speaking to her either. She's alone. Good, I thought, but I didn't say it. I don't need your apology, I said. I needed it years ago, when I was taking Mom to appointments alone, when I was feeding both of you on tips and boxed mac and cheese, when I was folding Amy's laundry while she was out meeting Jeremy. He nodded, I know. But I'll take the deed, I added, lifting my cup to my lips, because I'm done asking for what's mine. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 10 years. We didn't talk about reconnection. There were no romantic overtones. Just two people, once family, now fractured, but honest. That night when I got home, Mildred was sitting in the living room. She looked at me like she didn't know who I was anymore. Where were you? Dinner, I said, slipping off my heels. With Todd, she asked. I nodded. You're not taking him back, are you? I laughed. No, that version of me doesn't live here anymore. She looked at her tea. You're different. I'm free. And for the first time, the words didn't feel like a performance. They felt like truth. It came 2 nights after the dinner with Todd, a soft rustle under my bedroom door. I was brushing my hair in the mirror when I heard it, the unmistakable whisper of paper sliding against wood. At first I thought it might have been a note from a delivery service or some flyer stuck in the wrong slot. But no, it was handwritten, folded carefully in half, with my name scrawled in an uneven hand. Mildred's. I sat on the edge of the bed, heart ticking strangely in my chest, and unfolded it. Dear Evelyn, I wasn't planning to stay here forever. When Amy brought me, she said it would be a few weeks. She told me you were away at a clinic, and I thought maybe you wouldn't be coming back. Maybe you'd found something better. I see now how wrong that was. You don't need to hear my excuses. But I want you to know I saw what Amy was doing. I saw the photos. I heard her whispering on the porch when she thought I was asleep. I knew. And I stayed anyway. That's on me. But I want to leave with some part of me intact. So here is my truth. Amy has always been afraid of being ordinary. That's why she craves chaos. That's why she needs someone like you to steady her, so she can feel superior by comparison. I was just convenient, and so were you. I'm leaving next week. I've spoken to my sister in Tallahassee. She'll take me in. I won't ask you for forgiveness, but I do thank you for not slamming the door on me. Mildred. I read the letter twice. And for the first time since the day I came home from the clinic, I felt something unexpected. Closure. Not a neat, perfect one, not a movie ending with swelling music, but a small crack of light beneath a long locked door. When I stepped into the hallway the next morning, she was already packing. Her robe was folded neatly. The crossword books were stacked. She didn't speak as I passed, but she nodded, and I nodded back. Some things don't need to be said. Later that afternoon, I walked through the house alone. Each room hummed with silence, real silence, not the kind that hides tension under its tongue. In the garage, I found a box labeled Ease Things Garage in Amy's handwriting. Inside, the picture of me and Mom. My slippers, my college sweater, my books packed backwards to save space. I carried it all back into the house. Piece by piece, I returned what she'd tried to erase. On the shelf by the kitchen window, I placed the old photo of Mom and me, her hand on my shoulder, my awkward smile, the light filtering in through the window behind us. That was the real memory of this house. Not Amy's curated version, not her lavender-scented lie. Mine. That evening, I lit a candle again. No intention, no ritual, just light. And for once, I didn't feel like I needed to win. 'Cause I already had. They took my room. I rebuilt a home. They told a story about my absence. I wrote one about my return. And in the quiet, as the flame danced and the walls exhaled, I realized the house no longer belonged to me. I belonged to myself. 2 weeks after Mildred left, I settled into the house with a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in months. The air no longer carried that artificial lavender haze, but smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and hope. Then one evening, just as the sun dipped low, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it slowly. Amy stood there, her hair pulled back tight, eyes rimmed red like she'd been crying or trying not to. "I need to talk," she said, voice brittle but steady. I hesitated. Inviting her in meant opening a door I wasn't sure I wanted to open again. But I stepped aside. She came in, eyes scanning the house, the rooms she once called hers, the spaces she tried to claim. "Why now?" I asked when she finally sat at the kitchen table. Amy took a deep breath. "Because I'm alone. Jeremy left, my cousin kicked me out, and I'm tired of running." Her hands trembled slightly. "I made a mess," she said. "A terrible one. But I never wanted to lose you." I studied her. After everything I said quietly, why should I believe that? Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I was scared," she whispered. "Scared of being ordinary, scared of being forgotten. I thought if I could take everything, your room, your life, that I could stop the loneliness." She looked up. "And it didn't work." I nodded slowly. "People don't disappear when you take their things," I said. "They fight back, they survive, and sometimes they win." Amy wiped her face and stood. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "But if you ever want to talk, I'll be here." She left before I could answer. The door closed softly behind her. And I realized something: forgiveness isn't a gift you give to others. It's something you give yourself. I locked the door and went back to my room, my real room, and closed it behind me. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows playing tricks with my mind. The house was quiet now, too quiet almost, but it was mine again. The battles were over, or so I thought. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Can we talk? I need to say things I never had the courage to say." No name, no hint. My heart raced. Was it Amy, Jeremy, or someone else caught in this web? I hesitated, then typed back, "Who is this?" A moment later, the reply. "It's Todd." Todd, after everything, he was reaching out. Not with anger or accusations, but with something softer, something vulnerable. I messaged back, "What do you want to say?" His reply was almost immediate. "I've been thinking about everything. About you, Amy, the house. About what I lost and what I never realized I had. I need to confess some things I never told you." The weight of those words pulled me from the bed. For hours I exchanged messages with Todd, raw, painful, honest. He told me about his guilt over abandoning me and Amy, about the loneliness that had driven her away, about his own failures as a husband and brother. He confessed things he'd never said aloud. "I was afraid of losing control. I didn't protect you when you needed me most. I'm sorry for every time I chose silence over truth." As dawn crept in, I realized that this mess of love, betrayal, and fractured family wasn't over. But maybe there was room for healing. The past was a heavy stone, but maybe we could start to build something new atop it. I saved the conversation and set the phone down. The sun was rising, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to hope. The days after Todd's texts, life felt both fragile and charged, like the calm before a storm. I was trying to rebuild, trying to breathe in the space I'd fought so hard to reclaim. But then there was a knock. Not the polite, casual knock of a neighbor dropping off a casserole or asking to borrow sugar. This was hesitant, uneven, like whoever was on the other side wasn't sure if they belonged here. I opened the door to find Karen from next door, the woman I'd always thought was a friendly, if nosy, neighbor. Her eyes flicked past me as if looking for someone behind. Then she lowered her voice. "I need to tell you something about Amy." My heart clenched. Karen looked over her shoulder, then leaned in closer. "She's been seeing someone else? Not Jeremy?" I blinked. "Who?" Karen hesitated, biting her lip. "Someone married, someone dangerous." I wanted to ask more, how long, why, but Karen just shook her head. She said it was the only way to feel alive, that it was better than the emptiness in this house. I felt cold. All these years, Amy chasing something she could never find. chasing shadows. And me caught in the middle, the ghost of a family she pretended to love. Karen pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. Found this slipped under my door. Thought you should have it. It was a photograph. Amy in a dimly lit bar, arms wrapped around a man I didn't recognize, his wedding band catching the light like a secret. I stared at it, the edges trembling in my fingers. Another chapter, another betrayal. But this time I wasn't the only one keeping secrets. And maybe that meant it was time to stop surviving and start living on my own terms. That photo burned in my hands like a brand. Amy with another man, someone married, someone dangerous. The edges of that picture felt sharper than any knife I'd ever held. I thought about calling Todd, telling him everything, but part of me knew he was already carrying too much. Amy's chaos wasn't just hers. It tangled all of us like a web we couldn't escape. I needed clarity, space, control. So I sat down and wrote. Not a letter, not a confrontation, but a confession. A confession to myself. I wrote about the betrayal, the heartbreak, the quiet nights alone in a house that wasn't mine anymore. I wrote about love lost and love betrayed, about fear, about resilience, about what I wanted, not what they wanted for me. I reread it, felt my chest loosen. That night I sent a message to Todd. Thank you for reaching out, for the honesty. I'm ready to start over, but this time on my terms. And then I deleted the photo from my phone. It wasn't my story to carry anymore. The next morning, I opened the window and let the fresh air sweep through the house. The lavender was gone, and so was the past. I was ready to live, to love, to be free. Weeks passed. The house breathed again, each room slowly filling with my laughter, my music, my quiet moments of peace. Todd visited sometimes, but mostly we stayed in our own lanes, mending wounds at our own pace. Amy was out of the picture. Rumors floated that she'd moved to a distant city, starting over, carrying her secrets and scars. Mildred's chair was empty, her scent finally gone. One evening, I found myself sitting by the window in my room, the room that was mine once more. I held a glass of wine and stared out at the neighborhood, watching lights flicker on one by one. And then it came to me what Amy whispered to me in that first confrontation, the words that had haunted me. She makes fewer demands than you ever did. Was that true? Was I too much, too loud, too unwilling to bend? I shook the thought away. No, I am enough. I'm the woman who stayed when they wanted me gone. The woman who fought for her space, not just a room in a house, but a place in a story where she mattered. I poured the last sip of wine, closed my eyes, and smiled. Because the future without me, it was never an option. I am here. I have always been here, and I always will be.